So I thought I'd make a little chat about ironies upon ironies regarding the Kavanaugh nomination for the Supreme Court of the US. So Friday, the interesting information about his sexual assault of a woman was blasted into the media. And she came out this weekend to be public, and the issue is before us whether or not we can have a sex predator on the Supreme Court of the United States. And what was so particularly interesting about it is I have put forward a very similar type of case in Clatsop County regarding very similar behavior of a man pressing himself upon me, physically impeding my freedom of movement and restriction. The striking difference of detail is that Kavanaugh is said to have ripped at her clothes, covered her mouth, and raised the radio to drown out her plea, and that he had a co-conspirator. She was obtained upon her attempting to run up a stairway and go to a bathroom at a house where there was a party of teenagers, like DC prep school kids. And I think after the hullabaloo about, oh, he's such a family man, and oh, he's a great coach, and this sort of gregarious Catholic personality type that is obviously going to be extremely anti-abortion and anti-Roe v. Wade, getting this sex abuse story and then finding out his co-conspirators actually even included him as a character in his novel as Bart O'Kavanaugh instead of Brett Kavanaugh. It was just kind of disastrous import that he's this drunkard. It's really nice that we get to have this conversation. So the filthy DA's office called me today to say they're not pursuing charges, and there's a transition going on. We're not going to have Marquis anymore, and I'm not so sure about what's going on with Ron Brown. I mean, the case was a hard to prove it kind of thing. I was afraid if I called police, the officer might be even more misogynistic than the man who's pinning me, right? He might be really derogatory, and no one's in the mood for more verbal abuse when one's been attacked. And by trying to minimize it and walk through it, when I very carefully took my steps along the way of pursuing administrative remedy, my first plan of attack was accountability from the assailant, which, being a literate age with email and such, one would think one could accomplish something. But he was very evasive. Each and every time I tried to bring it up, eventually his boss over at Sunset Empire and Park and Recreation kicked him into an apology. Pretty much like, settle this and deal with this. But fundamentally, I've had a few revelations, one of which is that the whistleblower suppression, which led to the institutional failure, denied me access to the right that I would have had within 180 days of his assault to a sexual abuse prevention order. Whether or not I attempt to pursue it based on his recent too close to me incident, as I'm describing it, after someone has sexually assaulted you, seeing them in a public place is definitely upsetting, nerve-wracking. What I found through the administrative process is that the first attempt to whistleblow was suppressed, or the person herself was in denial. I felt more comfortable speaking to a woman. She was also being encroached upon by his predatory sensibility. And so I sympathized with her. Oh, he would never do that. And of course I thought, oh, he would never do that. I would not have entertained the notion of even offering him a cup of tea, which I did at his begging. And I recall now the fear I had. And then I recall the fear as he launched into his monologue about having herpes. And that was all very frightening. So I thought the aggravating factor of the intimidation regarding infliction of emotional distress for the infliction of a disease upon me was possibly a startling feature of this type of interaction. Also the fact that he did a pin down of my arms and a pin down of my legs and a rubbing of himself and a hold down. And that release that occurred, I do believe it's also with my strain. So I think he was 46 or 7 when this occurred. I was 39. But a 47-year-old doing this versus a 17-year-old, it's very, very startlingly bad behavior. I mean, as for a job interview, if he's being interviewed to work for my organization, this is not the way to treat your interviewer. So I, thinking like spycraft and Grandpa's job for the CIA and all of that, I'm thinking, oh gosh, you can't even control your impulses. You are completely disrespectful, or you see a woman and you think of that's someone you want to dominate or injure. That's unseemly, that's unusual. And the ways I thought about it were very I think archaic. I thought, oh, he's a rake, which is evidently an antiquated term. I thought he's a cad, which is a disreputable person. I remember thinking weak. Oh, you are so weak, as he's pinning me down. I just thought, this is the weakest thing ever. Weak of character, a weak moral failing in the sense that one would want to have a good character and a good name. I also felt it was almost a retribution for my manliness. I'm kind of a very assertive person, and I felt like him trying to just pin me down was a way of trying to gain dominance and submission from me when I was not submitting to his sexual come-on or his... I think he arrogantly believed he could be more interesting to me as a man, and I said, no, I would rather date a woman if I were to date anyone in addition to my boyfriend. And I think that sort of like, no, you're not a woman, sorry, and no, I've already got a man, I've got one of those. It really hurt his feelings, and he had to hurt me back. So now that I've made this big stir, I don't know how to break the news. And it's almost like the poetic justice of me being denied justice as a human being with a right to bodily autonomy and a right not to be attacked and a right to be valued for my mind or my integrity or respected for disability or respected for my civil rights. As I'm being denied all of that, this gigantic morality play of Kavanaugh doing something very similar is now going on, where someone like this assailant, Chris Duffy, who comported himself as a progressive who worked for Hillary Clinton's campaign and blah, 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 is going to be, oh, yes, Kavanaugh is going to destroy women's rights, is a raging misogynist, is going to gut Roe v. Wade, and also assaulted a woman when he was 17. But now it's like the floor falls out for men when they know they've engaged in this type of behavior themselves. And I'm wondering, is the DA, Ron Brown, similarly compromised? Did he do this kind of thing too? So therefore he has a conflict of interest and can't conceive of prosecuting a poor little man like Chris Duffy, who just innocently was just pushed to assault a woman, or this sort of glamorization of what male violence is. I mean, I don't know, but I do know Ron Brown's house was attacked by arson by someone he had put away for some petty crime, some 19-year-old, and he and his wife and family were terrorized. And I was given the excuse last week from the district attorney's office that Ron Brown's father died, so therefore he can't review the case. And I was thinking, like, now I think what's going to be absurd is the way the institutional failure which contributed to the suspense and the dragging of this out, will not, since they put so much weight on the district attorney's office to make some huge monumental decision, now it's almost like welcome back to anarchy. That's right back where we started, when this person overpowered someone smaller than him. And fundamentally, I would say to him, pick on someone your own size. If you're 6'6", if you're 200 pounds, I don't know what's his weight, but he's huge compared to me. Pick on someone your own size. And my good friend said, make the coward pay. So I know in some ways, I said to my friend, this is like relying on a horse and buggy to get me somewhere. This is like a quill or a document with like by candlelight. This is not an effective machine. What do I have? I have YouTube, and I have a victory because YouTube is sustaining my freedom of speech to ask his boss to stay away from me in public places, since the strategic interference of the whistleblower suppression was an institutional failure, a failure of mandatory reporting obligations on the part of their social agency, which is tasked under Department of Human Services, Northwest Senior and Disability Services multi-county agency, which is receiving state money and expected to abide by state law, which would imply respect of federal law as well, ADA, respect of civil rights law, non-discriminatory intent. So all of those violations occurred, as well as strategic anti-SLAPP, and strategic lawsuit against public participation, the California way of saying that concept is they are trying to suppress my testimony and suppress my ability to communicate, and basically sort of nullify my humanity in protecting my perpetrator, despite his admission to attacking me, to adult protection, which the question I never got from the DA's office, which I may yet get to meet Ron Brown and talk with him about this, is why was not that admission of wrestling and tussling at least processed as a simple assault? I have said that it was against my will. I've said it was painful, it was crushing, it was humiliating, it was degrading. It was indeed sexual. It was an attempted rape that was abandoned, possibly when compassion intervened like an angel rescuing me from the jaws of death. At some point, my lack of interest in him sexually possibly made him feel so guilty that he couldn't rape me. The lack of consensuality of it caused him to abandon his attempted rape. And this is a person you should want to send your seniors to for senior services. Really? Really? But I heard they put the pedophile in the food stamp office. This is just normal Clatsop County dirtiness. So I'm just learning about how things work around here. Near the ocean, in rural Oregon.